January 14, 1954, San Francisco City Hall. The most famous woman in the world married the most famous baseball player in America in a ceremony so private that the press only found out after it was over. No white dress, no flowers, no performance for the cameras. Just Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio and a judge and a handful of witnesses in a plain municipal room doing something that both of them understood in their different ways was about need rather than strategy. She needed safety. He needed her. Those are not the same thing. They were never the same thing. And the distance between what she was looking for and what he was able to give her would widen over the 9 months that followed into something neither of them could bridge. A gulf that was not the product of cruelty or indifference, but of a more painful and more common failure. Two people who genuinely loved each other being completely unable to give each other what the other one actually needed. Joe DiMaggio loved Marilyn Monroe with a totality that very few people ever loved anyone. He had been in love with her image before he met her, had seen her photograph, and arranged, through mutual friends, an introduction that he pursued with the focused determination of a man who knows what he wants and does not waste time pretending otherwise. When they finally met in 1952, the attraction was immediate and mutual and real. She found in him something she had been looking for her entire life: solidity, constancy, the specific safety of a man who was not going anywhere. He was not going anywhere. That part was true. What was also true was that the woman, Joe DiMaggio, was not going anywhere from was not Norma Jeane. It was Marilyn, the image, the phenomenon, the most desired woman in the world. And the distance between that woman and the woman Norma Jeane actually was the reading, the journals, the ambition, the complexity, the need to be seen as more than a surface, was a distance that Joe DiMaggio, for all his devotion, could not cross. This is episode 4, 2 marriages, 2 men who loved her for opposite reasons, neither of whom could give her what she actually needed, and the slow, devastating education of a woman who kept believing against accumulating evidence that love was possible, real love, complete love, the kind that saw all of her and stayed anyway. She was right to believe it. It just never arrived. Joe DiMaggio was, by any measure, one of the most remarkable men of his generation. He had grown up the son of a Sicilian immigrant fisherman in San Francisco, had risen through sheer talent and discipline to become the greatest baseball player of his era, and had carried himself through 15 years of public life with a dignity and a composure that the press and the public found almost mythological. He was handsome in the specific, contained way of a man who knows his own worth and does not need to advertise it. He was private, intensely, almost ferociously private, in a world that ran on publicity and performance. He was, in short, almost the opposite of everything that the entertainment industry valued and rewarded. He was also, from the moment he first saw Marilyn Monroe's photograph, completely gone. The courtship had been patient and deliberate in the DiMaggio way. He was not a man who rushed things or performed enthusiasm he did not feel. He arranged the introduction through friends. He showed up. He was consistent. He made clear, through his behavior rather than through declarations, that he was serious and that he was not going away. Marilyn, who had spent her entire life with people who left, found this quality almost overwhelmingly appealing. What she found less appealing, as the relationship deepened and then became a marriage, was his vision of what their life together should look like. DiMaggio was a traditional man in the deepest sense, not through ideology or conscious decision, but through the simple fact that he had grown up in a world with clear, uncomplicated ideas about the roles that men and women played in each other's lives, and those ideas were built into him at a level below where argument or negotiation could reach. He wanted a wife, a real wife, someone who was present, who was home, who existed in the domestic space of their shared life as a full and constant presence. He wanted, in other words, for Marilyn to stop being Marilyn. Not in those words. He would never have said it in those words, but the jealousy that surfaced, raw, unmanageable, genuinely frightening in its intensity, every time the Marilyn that the world loved appeared in public, told the whole story without any words being necessary. The way he responded to the film roles, to the public appearances, to the specific and overwhelming attention that her existence in any space produced. He could not separate the woman he loved from the image the world desired, and the world's desire for her was something he experienced as a constant low-grade threat to everything he was trying to build with her. The marriage lasted 9 months. She filed for divorce in October 1954 with a press conference outside the courthouse that was, in its own way, one of the great performances of her career. Composed, dignified, giving nothing away, revealing nothing of what it had cost her. She had loved him. She had genuinely loved him. And she was leaving because loving someone and being able to live with them are not the same thing, and she had learned that distinction at 9 months' cost. But before the divorce, there was a night in New York City that crystallized everything wrong with the marriage in a single, public, unforgettable image. September 1954, the filming of The 7-Year Itch. The scene that everyone knows, Marilyn standing over a subway grate on Lexington Avenue at 2 in the morning, her white halter dress blowing upward around her, while cameras rolled and a crowd of 2,000 people watched and cheered and the flashbulbs exploded in continuous succession. It was one of the most famous images ever captured on a public street. It was also, for Joe DiMaggio, watching from the edge of the crowd, one of the worst nights of his life. He stood there in the dark at the back of the crowd and watched the woman he had married 6 months earlier stand in front of 2,000 strangers and a film crew while her dress blew around her thighs, and he felt something that no amount of dignity or composure could contain. The rage was visible to the people near him. The press photographed his face. The photographs told a story that no caption needed to explain. What the photographs also told, though this received less attention at the time, was the story of 2 people who had fundamentally different relationships with Marilyn Monroe's public existence. For her, this was work. This was the image she had built, the career she had fought for, the professional life she had constructed from nothing over 10 years of relentless effort. The dress and the subway grate and the crowd and the cameras were not a violation of anything private. They were the job, the art, the thing she was extraordinarily good at and had every right to continue doing. For him, it was something else entirely. It was the most private thing in his life, his wife, the woman he had brought home, being offered to the world in a way that he could not process as professional and could only experience as personal. They went back to their hotel room after the shoot. The people nearby heard the argument through the walls. By the time they returned to California, the marriage was functionally over. The divorce papers were filed within weeks. He never stopped loving her. That is the part of the Joe DiMaggio story that is most important to understand. The divorce did not end what he felt. He never remarried. He sent roses to her grave 3 times a week for 20 years after her death, quietly, without announcement, without any apparent expectation of recognition or credit. Just the roses 3 times a week for 20 years. He loved her more completely and more permanently than almost anyone in her life ever did. He simply loved the wrong version of her. If Joe DiMaggio had loved the image rather than the woman, Arthur Miller made the opposite error, or what appeared at first to be the opposite error. Miller was everything DiMaggio was not: an intellectual, a playwright, the most critically respected American dramatist of his generation, the man who had written Death of a Salesman and The Crucible, and who moved through the literary and political life of 1950s America with the authority of someone whose ideas genuinely mattered. He was not interested in Marilyn Monroe, the phenomenon. He was interested, or appeared to be interested, in Norma Jeane, the woman underneath the image, the reader and the thinker and the person of genuine substance that the world kept overlooking. Marilyn believed him. She had every reason to want to believe him. Here was the thing she had been looking for: a man who saw past the surface, who valued what was underneath, who could meet her in the interior life she had been cultivating alone for years. She converted to Judaism for him. She read his plays with the same seriousness she brought to Dostoevsky, treating them as literature rather than as the work of someone she happened to be sleeping with. She believed, for a significant period of time, that this was real. that she had found, finally, the relationship in which all of her could exist without any of it being inconvenient. They married in June 1956. The wedding photographs show two people who look genuinely like they are beginning something. What happened to the marriage is documented with the specific cruelty of a single discovered journal entry. During the filming of The Prince and the Showgirl in 1956, while Marilyn was struggling with the production and with the condescension of Laurence Olivier, and with the anxiety that always attended the serious work she cared most about, she found Miller's private journal. She was not looking for it. She found it, and she read it. He had written that he was disappointed in her, that she was not what he had hoped, that she was exhausting. Her needs, her anxieties, her inability to simply be the person he had imagined she would be. He had written about her the way a man writes about a version of someone that exists only in his own head, and that the actual person keeps failing to become. She read it. She said nothing. She went back to work. She delivered the performance that Olivier would eventually have to call extraordinary. And she kept being Arthur Miller's wife for 4 more years, carrying the knowledge of what he had written, being what he needed her to be, while something inside her continued its long and quiet collapse. But the marriages were not only about the emotional failures of the men involved. They were also about losses that Marilyn Monroe carried largely in private and that her biographers have often underemphasized in favor of the more dramatic narrative of the famous relationships. She wanted children. She had wanted children for most of her adult life, not abstractly, not as a social obligation, but with a genuine and urgent longing that connected directly to the deepest wound in her history. She had been a child without parents. She knew from the inside what that felt like, and she wanted to be for someone what no one had been for her, the unconditional, permanent, present love that a child required and that she had spent her entire life searching for in other forms. She miscarried twice during her marriage to Arthur Miller. The losses were devastating in the way that such losses are devastating. Not cleanly, not with a clear beginning and end, but with the particular drawn-out grief of something that keeps being hoped for and keeps not happening. Each attempt carrying more weight than the last, each failure adding to an accumulation of loss that had nowhere adequate to go. She did not speak about the miscarriages publicly. They were private in the way that the most important things in her life were always private. The reading, the journals, the poetry, and now this. The gap between what Marilyn Monroe was publicly and what Norma Jeane was, privately, had never been wider than during the Miller years, when the most famous actress in the world was quietly grieving children she had not been able to keep, and a marriage that was already gone in every way that mattered, while still technically intact. Miller, to his credit and to the credit of his genuine but insufficient love for her, wrote The Misfits for her during this period, a film built around her specific qualities as an actress and as a person, designed to give her the serious, dramatic role she deserved. It was a genuine act of love. It was also, by the time filming began in the Nevada desert in 1960, the last act of a marriage that both of them knew was over. He asked for the divorce during production. She found out on set. She went back to work the next morning. The Misfits was filmed in the Nevada desert in the summer and autumn of 1960, and the conditions of the shoot were, by any measure, extraordinarily difficult. The Nevada heat was brutal, temperatures regularly exceeding 110 degrees, the kind of heat that wears at people's nerves and judgment and physical reserves even under normal circumstances. The circumstances were not normal. Director John Huston was drinking heavily throughout production, making decisions that the cast and crew found erratic and sometimes incomprehensible. Clark Gable, Marilyn's co-star, the man who had been Hollywood royalty since before she was born, was performing his own stunts in conditions that his body, at 59 years old and in imperfect health, was not equipped to handle. The production was running over schedule and over budget, and at the center of all of it was Marilyn Monroe, medicated and exhausted and quietly devastated by a marriage ending in real time around her, being asked to deliver a performance of raw emotional honesty on a schedule that accommodated none of the conditions under which raw emotional honesty is actually possible. She did it anyway. That is the thing that must be said clearly and kept central to the story. She showed up. She was late, chronically, significantly, in ways that frustrated everyone and added days to the production schedule. But she showed up. And when the cameras rolled, what she gave was everything that John Huston had put her through the desert heat to find. Genuine, undefended, heartbreaking in the specific way that only real things are heartbreaking. Clark Gable, who had been skeptical of her before production began, was effusive about her work by the end. He said she was the most honest actress he had ever worked opposite, that what she did on camera was not performance in any conventional sense, but something closer to truth, the actual interior life of a woman who was going through something real, transmitted directly through the character she was playing without any protective distance between them. Gable died of a heart attack 10 days after filming wrapped. He never saw the finished film. The film was released in February 1961. It was Marilyn Monroe's last completed film. She never made another one. She checked herself into a psychiatric facility shortly after the release. She said she needed help. She was right. She had needed help for a long time. The help that arrived was partial and insufficient and came too late, but she asked for it. Even now, even at this point in the long decline, she was still reaching, still trying. Still the girl from the foster homes who had not yet entirely given up on the idea that someone, somewhere, had something adequate to give her. 2 marriages, 9 months with DiMaggio, 4 years with Miller. A total of less than 5 years of trying to find, in the formal structure of a life shared with someone else, the safety and the recognition and the complete love that Norma Jeane had been looking for since she was 7 years old and her mother was taken away. Neither marriage failed because of indifference. DiMaggio loved her too much and in the wrong direction. Miller loved the idea of her and found the reality exhausting. Both men, in their different ways, were loving something other than the full and complicated person she actually was. She had been loved for the wrong things her entire life. The image, the phenomenon, the symbol. Never simply for Norma Jeane, the girl who read Dostoevsky and wrote poetry in notebooks and wanted children and was frightened most of the time and kept working anyway. That love never came. And the absence of it, compounding over years, was becoming something that not even the strongest will and the most disciplined intelligence could indefinitely absorb. Episode 5, the collapse, the pills, the firings, the hospitalization, and the slow unraveling of a woman who had held herself together through everything and was finally, terribly, running out of the strength to keep doing it. This is Legends of America,